Just do a quick introduction. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining the Green Future webinar series. This series is a monthly knowledge session initiated by the IVC Climate and Sustainability Council. This session is the second of the series titled Transition from ICE to EV. We have two sessions today, starting with a special address by Mr. Mandhana, and post that we'll have a panel discussion led by Priya of Thea Ventures. Please welcome Mr. Satish Mandhana, who will be delivering the special address on the topic. Satish is a Senior Managing Director and Chief Investment Officer at Eversource. He has over 36 years of experience in private equity, corporate finance, investment banking, and business strategy. He's a pioneer in creating scaled platforms in real estate, telecom, hostels, etc. As managing partner and CIO at IDFC Alternatives, Satish made 28 investments deploying USD 1 billion and monetizing 26 investments in full or partial exits. Mr. Mandhana was also a member of Government of India's working group on power for the 11th plan. He has always he's also been an executive committee member of IVCA and CII committee on climate change. Mr. Mandhana, over to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for putting those kind words. My fellow enthusiasts, today I'm happy to share my views on a topic of immense importance and potential: the transition from internal combustion engines to electrical vehicles, whether battery-driven or driven by fuel cell, and the unprecedented trillion-dollar opportunity it presents. As we gather here to discuss this transformation shift, it's imperative to recognize that we stand at the precipice of a revolution that will reshape not only the way we drive, but also the global economy. As Eversource from current funds, may I request other participants to remain on mute? I might include examples from India. While success stories led by leaders, Tesla's global context is well known. The traditional ICE vehicles invented in 1885 have served humanity for over a century, providing mobility and convenience, but they have also brought along environmental and sustainability challenges. The urgent need to combat climate change and reduce emission, improve energy efficiency, and minimize dependence on finite fossil fuels have driven the rapid rise of electrical vehicles. The transition from ICE to EV, not merely a shift in technology, it's a monumental transformation of the entire industry ecosystem. The potential economic impact of this transition is nothing short of staggering and significant. The inevitable step also leads to a massive reskilling requirements to make this transition a just transition. The key driver of this transition lies in the need for accelerating the net zero movement, and no nation or corporation can achieve the same in the announced timeline unless there is a mass participation. I'll take a minute to digress a bit, but this is significantly important for everybody who believes in a green future. To enable this mass participation for this green future, 4 steps by any nation can go a long way and will create investment opportunities too. These being the first step, mandated requirement for every corporate or institutions to publicly announce their net zero timeline. This will also act a seed for multiple investment opportunities for the corporate public institutions, as well as a net zero journey enablers. Second step being availability of a free of cost universal carbon footprint calculator.
Sorry, Mr. Satish, it feels like you've gone on mute.
So, am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
And I don't know at what time I got muted, because somebody might have muted everybody, including me.
Some 10 seconds ago, Mr. Mandhana.
Okay, let me repeat the second point of this transformation requirement, which is availability of a free of cost universal carbon footprint calculator, whose results are acceptable universally and And those results can be taken without an iota of doubt around greenwashing. The third being announcement by government world over of an impending carbon tax by certain timeline for a corporation not meeting the glide path of decarbonization. European Union announcement of a carbon tax has not only changed the behavior of the corporates in Europe, but has also changed the behavior of the supply chain in India and elsewhere. And that's a big step. And lastly, there is a need for an active carbon market, which will encourage investment in more climate positive businesses, allowing them to an opportunity to monetize carbon credits. Having talked about what can help in achieving the final objective, now I will share my views on why I believe that this represents a $1 trillion opportunity that spans multiple sectors, and here is why. First, EV manufacturing and supply chain. The core of this transformation lies in the production and assembly of EVs, including batteries and BMS, electrical drivetrains, vehicle control units, and advanced material and software for software-driven vehicles. Companies investing in EV manufacturing are poised to seize a substantial portion of this $1 trillion pie. This has allowed the opportunity for newcomers to muster courage into the manufacturing, as they find themselves to be devoid of any inertia or baggage or large investment in ICE-based facilities of engine and attached mechanical drivetrain manufacturing. At times, newcomers have an advantageous position due to a lead they may have in technology relevant for e-vehicles and ability to put most efficient systems in place. Early entrant in India, for example, Ather and many others in two-wheeler segment, Ultigreen, Euler, Kinetic Green, and scores of others in electrical three-wheeler segment, JBM, Greencell, and few others in four-wheeler segments are the apt example of newcomer making a mark in Indian automotive market using electrical vehicles. Global geopolitical dynamics is forcing creation of a newer factories in newer geographies, and markets having developed ecosystem of materials and components supplier like India offers a big opportunity for foreign manufacturers to set up shops in such market, as evident from Tesla's decision to have manufacturing base in different geographies, including in India. Various nations globally have announced a timeline by which ICE vehicles needs to be transitioned to e-vehicles, making it imperative for existing ICE players to work towards that transition. Moreover, incumbents can no longer let the market fritter away from them when they have a competitive edge of existing customer base, deep reach in sales and distribution, and brand loyalty. So they have also shown willingness to invest in this transition and invite external investment in their endeavor, as has been the case in Indian context, Tata Motors and Mahindra. When it comes to supply chain of EVs, there are significant commonality with existing supply chain, which will help in enabling a just transition. But there is new set of components and designs which are hitherto were not part of ICE vehicles, such as VCU, electrical drivetrains, IoT devices, lightweight strength members, flat board chassis, high voltage wiring harness, battery and motor coolants, client and monitoring software, self-diagnostic, etc., etc. The list is continuing, which offers opportunities for newer investments. Government of India's inclusion of electrical vehicle and components for the same in its production-linked incentive scheme to promote manufacturing, or USA's Inflation Act providing support for transition of EVs, and scrappage policy in India for older vehicles are examples of support being offered by various governments to make the transition happen and to make the demand rise. Total market for automobiles and components is currently estimated around $3 trillion annually. And hence, even without taking into consideration emergence of newer e-mobility segment, potential market for EV manufacturers and supply chain is more than $1 trillion opportunity. I'll come to the battery technology. The heart of an electric vehicle is battery. With ongoing advancement in battery technology and including longer ranges, faster charging time, and redundant and reduced cost, the battery market alone represents a massive growth opportunity. While lithium-based chemistry has dominated and continued to dominate current batteries, alternative chemistries as well as advanced variants of lithium chemistries are emerging with significant improvement in storage and power densities. Thanks to insistence on phased manufacturing program for availing FAME II subsidy in India, We already have a set of newer battery manufacturing facilities in place along with indigenous developed battery management system. Also, to promote cell manufacturing in India, which is a large opportunity, Government of India has included advanced chemistry cells as part of the production linked incentive scheme. Global market for automotive batteries was valued around $66 billion in 2022. However, actual market for advanced chemistries based batteries is going to be much larger due to emergence of significant demand for batteries as energy storage system for converting informed renewable energy power to firm power, thereby increasing the size of the investment opportunity in the batteries as such. I'll come to charging infrastructure, which is another crucial component of this change in the ecosystem. As electrical vehicle adoption increases, the demand for charging infrastructure will soar. Companies that invest in building, managing, and maintaining charging network are set to reap substantial rewards. Charging infrastructure within a city will be hybrid at home or office, charging using category 2 AC chargers or 3.5 to 22 kilowatt and high-powered DC fast chargers available at very strategic locations such as malls, large commercial complexes, fuel stations, distribution substations, etc. Significant investment opportunity exists for investing in manufacturing of both type of chargers exclusively for urban needs, and technology is readily available for setting up and scaling up the production. Commercial and operational feasibility of large-scale adoption of e-vehicles for intercity passengers and freight movement requires that a logjam of what comes first, that is fast charging infrastructure on highways, or enough EVs to make the charging infrastructure commercially viable, needs to be broken by installation of adequate ultra-fast charging parks, amenity centers on all highways, and expressways, unshackling e-mobility from range limitation. This single step creates a significant demand for manufacturing, managing, and maintaining a network of superchargers that is 250 kilowatt and above in these places. A proposal for effecting the same has been under consideration by the government, which leverages the NHAI power to charge to change the specs of highway and expressway to include charging infra as part of the bidding of the toll or entity and convert existing highways and expressways into e-highways by providing hybrid entity solutions for the charging infrastructure provider. I'll come to another important investment avenue for this transition, which is integration of the renewable energy with the charging infrastructure. EVs are as clean as the energy used to charge them. The integration of renewable energy sources like solar and wind power into EV charging ecosystem presents an attractive avenue for investment. Regulatory hurdles to allow every charging park to avail open access, and that too without incurring significant cross-subsidy or transmission charges, has been mooted. Effecting this requires establishment of a smaller substations and associated inverters infrastructure at the charging park or depots, in addition to opportunity to invest into renewable dedicated to charging infrastructure. Another big opportunity for investment in this transition is the software and connectivity related opportunity. With EVs becoming more connected, software and data-driven services for vehicle management, navigation, and entertainment will flourish, opening new avenues for innovation and investment. Indian technology companies have been a leading supplier of software-defined mobility solutions to all the leading automobile players globally, and demand for such solutions have risen exponentially, opening up the floodgates for additional investment. When we talk about software-driven services for e-mobility, it need not only be India-specific for software and telecom companies, but context is global market, which is accessible from any part of the world. Another area which will open up for investment going forward will include used EV market. As the EV market matures, the used EV market will also expand, creating opportunities for refurbishment, resale, and recycling businesses. This will include not only recycling of the EVs, but also of the batteries. Emerging market and developing countries are beginning to embrace EVs as a sustainable alternative to traditional vehicles. Companies that cater to these emerging markets will tap into the enormous customer base these developing countries offer. Lastly, on environmental sustainability, beyond financial opportunity, investing in EVs aligns with the environmental goal, contributing to a greener, more sustainable future, which can be a significant selling point for companies and investors. To fully grasp this enormity of the trillion-dollar opportunity, it is essential to understand that this transition is not confined to one region or industry. It's a global and cross-sectoral transformation that touches everything from energy to transportation, from manufacturing to technology. As we navigate this transition, we must also consider the importance of collaboration, innovation, and sustainability. The transition to EVs is not just about economic growth, it's about securing a cleaner, more sustainable future for generations to come. In conclusion, the transition from ICE to EVs represents an unprecedented trillion-dollar opportunity that transcends industries and borders. It's a chance for visionary businesses, investors, and governments to shape the future of the transportation while driving economic growth and safeguarding our planet. As we embark upon this electrifying journey, let us remember that it's not just about the dollars, it's about making history and creating a brighter, cleaner, and more sustainable world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mandana, for that amazing special address. May I now welcome Priya Shah of Thea Ventures. Priya is the general partner of Thea Ventures, which is a seed stage fund in India investing in high impact technology-enabled climate tech businesses operating across multiple sectors such as energy efficiency, electric mobility, renewable energy access, biofuels, carbon capture, waste to value, smart protein, etc., etc. Thea takes an active role in their portfolio companies, providing mentorship and value-added support across strategy. Priya, welcome to the panel. The next panelists are Akshay Shekhar, founder Kazam, Kunal Khattar, founder and managing partner Advantage, Kishlia Mishra, senior investment officer AIIB, Sheetal Behel, partner Mirak Ventures. Priya, it'd be great if you can also look at the introductions, maybe request them to introduce themselves. So over to you, and all the best.
Great. Thank you so much, Akriti. And thank you to everyone for attending this webinar. It's a great honor to be here and, incredible panelists here with fantastic perspectives to bring as well. So looking forward to this discussion. As the keynote address, we're very interesting to sort of learn about all of the different sectors behind electric mobility and the transition from ICE, internal combustion engine, to EV and the $1 trillion investment opportunity. Would just like to introduce the panelists as well before we dive into some of the broader perspectives around electric mobility and the current market landscape. So with us today, we have Kunal Khattar, founder and managing partner of Advantage. Advantage is an early stage mobility focused venture capital fund with investments ranging across shared mobility, electric vehicles, digital auto, logistics domain, also with portfolio companies such as Rapido, Chalo, Zingbus, and Exponent Energy. We also have Sheetal Bal, partner at Mirak Ventures, which is a sector agnostic fund investing in seed stage B2B and emerging technology companies, which are solving real problems, creating large scale impact, and a particular focus on climate tech, insurtech, SaaS, life sciences, and creator economy. And examples in their portfolio include Race Energy, Cell Propulsion, Pixel, and Bellatrix Aerospace. We also have Akshay Shekhar, founder of Kazam, an EV charging software platform, building India's largest smart and affordable EV charging network through their partnerships with fleets, CPOs, RWAs, and OEMs. And then we also have Kishlia Mishra, Senior Investment Officer of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB, based in Abu Dhabi, which is a multilateral development bank investing in both private funds and large-scale infrastructure projects, including renewables and others across Asia. So delighted to have you all here. The topic of the discussion, as we know, is talking about the commercial investment opportunity behind electric mobility, and I'm curious to hear all of your perspectives on that front. For context, as we've already heard from the keynote remarks, the government of India launched the FAME scheme back in 2015, which was a response to rising pollution and emissions from fossil fuel-powered internal combustion engines, or ICE vehicles. So through these incentives from the FAME India scheme and other subsidies, there was a large adoption or growing adoption of electric and hybrid vehicles. And the target is to convert 30% of total transportation into electric vehicles by the year 2030. So this has essentially then led to the growth of various different areas within EV, such as vehicle manufacturing of two-wheeler, three-wheeler, and four-wheeler vehicles, charging infrastructure, battery swapping infrastructure, ride sharing, clean energy storage and grid systems, software and data-driven solutions, and battery technology, and as well as EV financing and other sectors. This is also converged with net zero emission targets, carbon tax, as mentioned by Mr. Mandhana of Eversource, and also other drivers for the green growth agenda. So the net result of this has been an explosive growth of innovative early stage startups in the electric mobility space, as well as venture funds that are looking to make a bet on these technologies. So my first question to the panelists, and we'll have about 30 minutes or so of panel discussion, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. The first question is really around the current market landscape. And so what are the overall drivers that you think are there behind the EV transition in India in particular? And why do commercial investors see this sector as attractive from a returns perspective? So Kunal and Sheetal, would love to have your perspectives first on this question.
Sure, I'm happy to go first, Priya. No, absolutely. Thank you so much, IVCA, having us here, allowing us to talk a little bit about the philosophy and thesis behind the fund. I think that the subject matter says it all. So this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for investors because we estimate that the wealth creation over $1 trillion is going to happen. I think why this is an exciting opportunity in the electric mobility space is we've not seen this level of disruption since, say, the introduction of Model T and the assembly line in the auto industry. So this is where we are. And we're talking about disruption happening across the entire auto industry, across shared mobility and across logistics. So it's not just EVs itself and across energy. Let me add that component as well. Couple of points reason why this is the perfect opportunity for us. So our first investment was EV is about 5 years ago, and we realized it was a little early at that point, that inflection point hadn't been there. Today, I think what's happening is due to geopolitical reasons and the Ukraine war, we've seen consistently high oil prices. Secondly, of course, like you mentioned, India has 14 of the 15 most polluted cities in the world. So the emphasis on cleaning up the air has become not only a political, but a social and emotional issue as well. More importantly, what we've seen now happening is that because we've been investing in the shared mobility and the logistics space, the funding winter has forced a lot of our founders to start looking at a clear path to profitability. Now, if you are using any form of mobile transportation, whether it's two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, 40% of your operating cost is the cost of fuel. So if there is one significant cost that's in your control, it is your fuel cost. And transitioning from ICE to EV actually improves your contribution margin anywhere from 18 to 28%, depending on how extensively you're using that asset class itself. So I think these are three broad areas that we're looking for. And because we're talking about disruption at this scale, there are business opportunities across the industry that we are looking to untap, whether it's on the starting from the supply chain, which is the auto component side, or the OEMs. In the aftermarket, we are seeing EV financing, leasing, EV insurance as interesting opportunities. Energy, like I mentioned, is till now, if you were buying a vehicle, you were consuming petrol or diesel, which was under the preview or monopolistically under the public sector companies like Indian Oil or Bharat Petroleum. And now what we are seeing is, and typically almost 40% of the cost of ownership of a car is the cost of fuel. That 40% of share of wallet or revenue opportunity is now moving towards the private sector. So that's another area that we're very excited about.
Great. Thank you so much, Kunal, for sharing the perspectives on the fund and the thesis and how we've evolved over the past couple of years. Sheetal, would be great to hear from you as well on how Mirac views this EV opportunity.
Thanks, Priya. And hello, everybody else. Thanks to IVC also. Just a quick background. We've been looking at the EV space now for about 5 odd years. We first put out a thesis note in 2018, and we made 2 investments in the EV space from our first fund, one in a battery swapping company called Ace Energy, and one in a LCV company called Combustion. So, interestingly, Priya, I was going back and reading my thesis note from 2018, and I realized that nothing's changed at all. It's exactly my drivers for wanting to invest in EV are exactly the same. So let me start with that big picture question, right? Because you talked about what are the overall drivers behind the EV transition in India. So I think 5, 6 things, right? One obviously is climate change and how just imperative it's becoming, and the fact that everybody's paying attention to it. Second is battery tech, cost of battery tech. It's been dropping continuously. We're at now $130, $140 per kilowatt hour. This is supposed to go to sub $100 in another couple of years or so, making the cost of ownership effectively less than ICE vehicles. Then I think something which is underestimated and not talked about as much is all the ancillary technologies. So it's actually a lot of developments in AI, telecom, microelectronics, grids, data analytics, etc., which have made EVs easier to design, manufacture, monitor, manage. Without all these developments, you actually wouldn't have been able to do this quality of EV manufacturing, 5 years or 10 years ago. The other thing is then the regulatory environment, right? The governments across the world are using some sort of a carrot and stick sort of approach. In India, we've seen everything from more stringent norms for ICE vehicles to scrap policy, PLI scheme for battery manufacturing, EV battery swap policy, which come out. There's the same policy, etc. So there are a lot of regulatory tailwinds which are helping the growth of the industry. And then the last is the VC funding, of course. So which is rising year on year, and I think now in India we've seen about $2.5 billion of money invested in the EV space. So that's I think what I think was overall drivers. Priya, did you want me to talk about our perspective on investment areas now, or should we pick that up later?
We can touch on it now. Would be great
sure.
to hear. Yeah.
So, I don't think everything so we're a seed stage fund, right? We are writing first institutional checks into companies. So what is attractive for us is not necessarily the same thing which is attractive for later stage funds, and hence I'm just going to share a seed stage perspective, right? We had narrowed this down to 4 or 5 areas that we were interested in, and we've taken positions in a couple of them. One was all around battery engineering. One was around battery swapping businesses for 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers. This is a place we've taken a bet in. Integrated powertrains for CVs and buses, charging infrastructure management systems, whether it's individual systems, across systems, connected systems, and vehicle intelligence systems. These are things we're specifically interested in because, and our perspective is that we like to take bets on places where we think our money can take them to the next inflection point, right? There are many other options. For example, OEM plays are not for us simply because we believe that it requires much larger amounts of money. So you've seen OEM plays happening in traditional automotive majors putting large amounts of money into those. Those are probably not right for early stage VC investors, but there are other options. But there's something that Kunal said was, I think, true for us also. We either wrongly estimated or COVID even hurt our plans very badly. We also decided to take our first EV positions in 2019. And our assumption was that in the next 1 to 2 years, this will all be right and all the instruments will come in. But it didn't happen, partially because of the fact that, supply chain, disruptions happened massively and hurt EV companies a lot. But the other curious thing for me is the fact that, and this is still true, I don't think mainstream ABC investors have actually yet taken a shine to the EV space. So a lot of the money which is coming in is still coming either from international sources. It's coming from DFI, it's coming from large multifamily offices, it's coming from strategic investors in India, or it's again, coming from some form of alternate sources. But if you just take the top 5, let's say VC funds in India, almost none of them actually have an EV bet yet. So that I find still a little surprising, and I don't know why everybody's sort of sitting and waiting on the fence. And I think that they're coming in and taking positions will actually help boost this a lot. Something will actually, I think, change the trajectory completely. So we've been seeing that, number of EV startups have been going up, but I think few more Series B, C's kind of investments happening would help a lot.
Great. Thanks so much, Sheeta, for providing that additional color. I definitely agree with you on the fact that we need more diverse sources of capital coming into funding these early stage EV companies across different sectors, and to help broaden that pool of funding to help them scale up. And then you touched on many different areas for the drivers, so cost, regulatory, climate change, software, data-led technologies. And I think that's a great sort of segue to come to you, Akshay, because you're working on a very interesting sort of industry-wide play, as it were, on a platform, helping various different stakeholders connect through the charging network. So just curious to understand, from your perspective, what are the cutting-edge technologies powering the EV revolution in India? How do you see them all kind of growing over the next few years? And what are sort of some of the role of new technology entrants into the EV market, like Tesla, for example, and others that could be game changers for the adoption of EVs at scale?
Yeah, I think I first would want to tell you that every form of the technology that we use in charging in itself is so diverse. Right from the bottom of the pyramid, when you're talking of e-rickshaws, you have both charging as well as swapping that's happening in the market. Then you have slow two-wheelers, which also follow a similar concept around the e-rickshaw market. Once you move up the ladder, you typically have the two-wheeler fast and three-wheeler fast, typically manufactured by the incumbents and Ather, I would say, because Ather is an exception over there. And then you have these cars and four-wheelers commercial, typically the Tata Aces of the world. They are charging fast as well as slow. And finally, you have ultra fast charging that is happening at the bus level or the truck level. We've seen commercialization across the board right now, with slowly the four-wheeler commercials also picking up in the market. So technology is growing across this. Apart from that, you also see change in technology in the battery composition and chemistry side of things. So there are certain startups that are working specifically to replicate the same phenomena as and the behavior that you see with today's oil and gas, right? You just plug in 10 minutes, you're done, and then you move away. So that's also a play that's actually happening in the market as we speak. But apart from both two, right, you see a lot of technology that is needed to work across this value chain, because everybody is building their own stack and trying to create these wall gardens, even though that technology is specific, but they're trying to build that wall garden in and around it. So that horizontal play is also something that is now coming up into shape, which stitches this whole ecosystem and allows this whole data transform to happen across this value chain, because a OEM cannot build new technology if he does not understand what's actually happening on the ground, maybe with someone like a fleet. So newer plays in and around software is coming in play. Newer plays in and around BMSs are coming in play, which give you insights around the vehicle, which can also be thrown to the vehicle OEM, the battery manufacturers, to actually work around the insights that are coming on the market. I think the final play that I have also started seeing startups do very well is on the financing side, financing and distribution. So one would be, we're seeing a lot of multi-brand showrooms, not just multi-brand, channel distribution as well. So OEMs are forcing these organizations and provoking them to actually put up stalls in RWAs where they're able to reach the last mile directly, because that's how you actually reach and penetrate at the last level, right? Especially at the tier 2, tier 3 cities. That's happening. Second is, we're also seeing the distributors of the vehicles actually starting becoming charge point operators, because they want to give that push to actually for you to own a vehicle and have that last range anxiety to be dropped off. So those are some few changes that you're seeing. To kind of give you answer the second question in terms of the opportunity that's available, right? To give you a perspective, it was all commercial vehicles that were being adopted in the last 2 or 3 years. Specifically, the reason being TCO, right? The total cost of ownership when you drive these vehicles were predominantly much better in the commercial use cases as compared to a passenger use case. To give you a perspective, the single cost, one-time cost that you pay for the vehicle, if you multiply that by 5 times, would be the kind of fuel that you would consume in an ICE vehicle phenomena to do deliveries or to do commercial activity. And that kind of helped, not put a lot of significance on the one-time cost that's coming in play. And to give you a perspective, the ones who actually adopted to this were e-commerce players who were very technology first companies who were open to adopting to these technologies, and they have only converted to say 2,000 vehicles out of the 150,000 vehicles say an Amazon or a Flipkart actually owns today. So that's the potential that you have to kind of grow along with that. And I think the ace player in the four-wheeler commercial segment is Tata Ace, which in the lifetime has sold around 2.3 million vehicles in Indian context, and they have only sold around 1,500 vehicles to date. So that's the potential that is actually available in terms of how the market is growing right now. And the best part about it is they have seen how these products work in the market in the last 2.5 years at an accelerated study with the commercial fleet segment, and now are ready to push the baton in terms of opening up new dealership or activating their existing dealership to get the distribution done. So I would say this would be what's happening on the ground in terms of potential. And I think the new entrants coming in the market is actually good for companies. I would say EV is also a place where the incumbents and startups have worked synonymously together in a single platform. Unlike other industries where we would always the startups would be working on newer technologies and would typically supplement the incumbents, but EV has given us that level playing field. And with someone like even Tesla even coming in the market, it actually adds fuel in terms of us to think innovative, us to really think how we can disrupt the market and take away from these technologies. Because if you don't have a challenger in the market, then you don't really work hard to make newer technologies work, right? So this would be my perspective.
Right. Thanks so much, Akshay. And I think what you said is very valid in terms of an integrated platform for all of these different sectors to operate across different use cases, but particularly the commercial use case. And I think that's a super attractive in terms of the transparency that you have in this EV sector to actually shine a spotlight on very different parts of mobility, as it were, which is different from the traditional ICE opportunity. So Kishali, I just would like to come to you now to sort of touch on the international perspective. So you're based in Abu Dhabi, sort of looking at it from a multilateral bank perspective. Where do you think India stands globally with respect to the EV transition in terms of how we can export our technologies to other markets, which particularly technologies that we're building right now in India from the ground up, which of them have the most potential to be exported? And sort of maybe you can also touch on some of the environmental impact of India's EV market. How can this play a role in climate change and sort of the net zero transition as a country?
So thanks, Priya. At the outset, thanks to IBC and thanks to co-panelists to sit together. And I think there is a momentum we are further building upon it. So it's good to come together on that. I think from a multilateral bank perspective, let me just give perspective on two high-level commitments which international institutional investors we have made. One is a climate finance commitment. So as a multilateral, we have said all of our operations, what we do, 50% annually has to be going towards climate finance. So AIB book in last 7.5 years is now roughly $45 billion, which will grow exponentially because we have reached that critical mass now. So you can see the role which we can play by committing ourselves that every year what we do, 50% has to be climate. That itself mobilizes the capital. The second important piece here is the Paris Agreement and Paris alignment. So all the multilaterals have sort of a couple of years back decided that we will start adopting it in every project which we do. It's not necessarily a financing of EV. I think it comes to that even if as a multilateral we are supporting roads, bridges, transport projects, those projects have to include the features which enable the electric features. So it is not something that we build something and then we have to again go about and building upon it. So Paris alignment calls for looking at transport sector more holistically and targeting that 1.5%. So these are the two multilateral perspectives which we generally go about doing. Coming to where we are right now as an EV globally, I just wanted to throw two perspectives here. So the global oil consumption daily is roughly 100 million barrel per day. What the amount of oil displaced now by EV tentatively is only 0.7. So we are talking 0.7 vis-a-vis 100 million barrel per day. And with all the support, it will only go up to 5 million by 2030 as per the. So what I'm coming is that the runway of replacing conventional IC is huge, huge, huge. And it's just amount of oil displaced is one figure. Second thing which I just want to talk about is how much energy consumption, because there's one theory which says EV has to grow, but where is the electricity? India has, talking about frontier markets like Africa, Southeast Asia, where these things have to really grow and scale for EV to be universally adopted. The share of EV in global electricity consumption per year is 0.5%. And with all the push, it will only reach 4% of global electricity consumption by 2030. So these two figures itself, oil displays and electricity consumed, gives a perspective of where we are seated and where is the runway going across. Coming to the point of where is India seated, so of course, I'll not bring China and US into perspective because these markets are very advanced. But if you see in South and Southeast Asia perspective, India, Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam. And Thailand is one of the leaders in Southeast Asia because not only from an adaptation perspective, but also both supply and demand side. The consumer is willing to play and buyer is ready to make it. So Thailand is going for a lot of indigenization, which is happening in India now, of indigenizing the things locally so that they are locally produced and locally serviced. Indonesia is stepping the guns, but I'll say that they are also following what Thailand and India are doing now. Coming to the point on this, what India can support, I think India can really take from its legacy, software legacy of exporting. That software piece is something which is really, and now we talk about SaaS, of how India is serving for the global. It is global good. We are in G20 days, so we are talking more public goods here. So that software piece is so nuanced that having seen through in emerging markets, of course, it is very technical specific, but the expertise required to bring all these ecosystem players together is something which is something happening good in India. With this, let me take a pause and pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kisharia. Very interesting, vantage point that you have sitting outside India and the kind of global agenda around decarbonization and oil reduction and the sort of changing, transition that we are sort of facing in the future. I wanted to bring it back to the other panelists now, or sort of for comments on the next decade. So, we're in 2023 right now. We have a tremendous amount of drivers pushing us towards the EV transition, and would love to have your opinions on, the future. Basically, essentially, what would make this transition tip over into $1 trillion opportunity, and what could potentially hold us back as we think about some of the technology risks, some of the grid risks of whether our current electricity grid has the stability to withstand all of these new electric vehicles, the distribution of clean energy storage, for example, and the adoption risk as well. How do we see India kind of placed over the next 10 years in kind of addressing some of these risks, and will we emerge out of it as a fully transitioned country in terms of both on passenger side and the commercial side? Do we see that we'll get there eventually in 10 years' time?
So maybe I can add perspective here.
Sure, actually.
From the ground up.
Yeah.
So what we see currently is the focus and investment. I can speak fairly in terms of charging public and even the swapping infrastructure, right? We've seen a lot of push coming in from the FAME 1, FAME 2, specifically for a lot of public infrastructure, thinking that range anxiety can be reduced by putting a lot of public infrastructure in charging and swapping. But reverse has been true in terms of adoption. If you see, captive has predominantly been the one where you have put in a lot of vehicle adoption has happened. So that's on a very accelerate that and want to ensure that these guys start adopting, invest even in the captive charging infra play and the swapping infra play in the captive zone. This has already started happening because vehicle OEMs who have already made this kind of investments in the vehicle side have now started taking onus of distributing charging infra in both captive spaces and semi-captive spaces. So we see the top 3 or 4 guys actually now putting up charging stations themselves in residential zones, because they know this resident society has already got vehicles which are electric in nature. So that's one piece. The second piece that we also need to understand is on the grid side. If you understand the grid today, even if you go to 2030 and you basically do a simple math of adding the energy consumption in electric side as well as what we can generate as a nation, it adds up. We don't really need to put up new infrastructure for that. But the problem here is the peak load. The way humans function is that we will all come back at 6, 7 in the evening and plug our vehicles in. Nobody wants to get up at 2 in the night to plug it when it's the least amount of energy there, right? So there are two pieces to the coin. One is in terms of how do we break that peak loads and then spread it out in such a way that there is no infrastructure needs that are needed specifically for us to charge these vehicles overnight, etc. And the second part is how do we ensure that the grid actually sells electricity profitably to us, right? Because if they start putting up new power plants or only sell us during the peak hours, then they start losing money. So by giving at the non-peak hours electricity, they could actually enhance and improve their balance sheet altogether. So that's the second perspective that I have on the grid and the grid upgradation. Obviously, we also need to work on digitizing a lot of processes in and around the bureaucracy of getting electricity. A biggest challenge that we have today on ground would be how do I get electricity connection on ground at a particular remote location, or even in your say warehouse, how do I increase the load? And that whole process of where your application is and how does it really track around, and getting connection today is 6 months time, right? So how do we reduce that, and how do we ensure that we put it to a faster pace in terms of adoption happening or really on the ground? So these would be some of the few challenges, but as I said, we are post, and entrepreneurs like us really find a way out to work around these challenges. And when you have both side of the coin, which is the investors who are looking to invest in this opportunity and entrepreneurs like us who are willing to take up this challenge, I think we're all on the path to do that.
Great. Thanks a lot, Akshay. Kunal, any thoughts from you on
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as long as the total cost of ownership, as long as the economics remain positive, which fundamentally we think it does, ICE versus EV. I think that whatever challenges that come in the next 5 to 10 years, as an investor, I consider every challenge to be a business opportunity, right? Ultimately, that's what we're here for. That's why we have a startup ecosystem, where there is perfect choreography between the entrepreneurs, the investors, and policymakers, is to find solutions to upcoming challenges, whether it's issues with the grid, energy, whether there are funding challenges, sourcing of capital, whether it's technological challenges, right? Ultimately, I mean, a simple thing is that traditional EVs we had slow charging, right? It's how traditionally EVs were being charged. So we hit a roadblock because in India, the problem is you don't have enough real estate available to allow people to charge their vehicles, by parking in a public area for 4 to 6 hours. And Indians are unable to charge at home because the majority of them park their EVs on public roads, and not we don't have a home garage system. So what happened? Technology came with battery swapping or rapid charging and solved for that. So honestly speaking, at the end of the day, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And like I said, every challenge or issue that we see is actually an investment opportunity for us.
Thanks, Kunal. Sheetal, Kishalya, any comments from your side on how we're going to fare over this next decade in India in terms of the adoption of these vehicles and the clear transition towards EV?
After Sheetal. Sheetal, you are on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, that always happens one time, once or the other. Okay, so my thoughts, I'm overall very, very optimistic about EV adoption, not just in India, across the world. I think, people underestimate the law of compounding. I think these will go much, much faster than most people expect, right? Watch the last 2 years and from FY21 to 22, we saw tripling of the number of EV sales. We saw 2.5x the next year. You just keep going 2 to 3 times every year, and you're in a astronomical number by 2030. There are also some. This is an interesting thought I once had, which I want to put out, which is think about it this way: that every person who buys an EV will be a person who will never buy an ICE vehicle again. Typically, otherwise you're replacing an ICE vehicle every 5-7 years or so, and you're a recurring customer. Once you bought an EV, firstly, the car has infinite life effectively, and two, once you made the transition, you're not going to go back at all. So I actually think once it sort of entered the zeitgeist, it'll have a snowball effect. I also think that for it to enter the zeitgeist in India, we need like a Maruti Indiana. And I feel like Maruti is always a game changer whenever it comes to mass adoption of vehicles. But I think there are also things which are not being talked about, which need to be paid some more attention to, right? And I think actually I agree with this briefly. Just for example, grid infrastructure, right? I once seen a really interesting simulation which showed that that let's say a residential colony, roughly about the size of the colony I live in, right, which is about 800 houses or so. If we all decided to charge their four-wheeler vehicles simultaneously overnight, it would lead to the northern grid collapsing, because that's how much local imbalances would happen. Right? So at an aggregate level, these are going to make a negligible dent in our overall, power and energy requirements. Right? That even if we hit at 2040 goals, they will change it by like a single-digit percentage points. But local imbalances will need to be addressed, right? And this is something which I don't think has been paid attention to at all. And I think this is one of those, dark things which is not being talked about or paid attention enough. So overall, I remain very optimistic. I think the government's doing right things. We could always do more. I think that there are enough tailwinds in all sorts of ways. I think technologies are getting better, becoming cheaper. But I think there are just some additional things like the grid which need to be paid attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sheetal. And finally, Kishalya, any thoughts from your end? Yeah.
So I think the emerging markets are markets where monetization is always difficult. In EV, we have all B2B and then B2C type of models. I think one promising aspect for India could be because of the total cost of ownership and because India is one of the globally leading markets for three-wheeler commercial use cases by enterprises, is making an extension of it and going for large-scale commercial vehicles. Because a natural extension for the same would be that, because the total cost of ownership hypothesis, once it's proven within the city, it can go intra-city and then it come on highways. That's how the natural way should be for commercial. Personal side, it will happen. It will take its own time. It will have its own challenges. But I think that is a good way for India, like it did for three-wheelers. It has made a mark for itself. And one big challenge which I feel and seeing vis-a-vis other countries, not developed economies again, emerging markets, is the equal amount of impetus given on charging infrastructure outside tier 1 cities itself. Here, because in India, we have concentrated cities and we think one city as good as a state. But for other countries where they're trying to do EV, that density is not as much there. I think if we have to really revolutionize and make this, scalability is now the risk, honestly. Technology is something which can be scaled now, while technological innovation will happen. That scalability will genuinely come from having a very dependable infrastructure across the country. When I say across, means across, and this is from cities to state highways to national highways and then to ports. That sort of journey is what we should envisage for the growth and addressing that.
Thank you, Kishalya. So we've heard some really interesting perspectives from the panel around the total cost of ownership, the transition towards grid stability, making sure that we have enough optimism around the investment opportunity, which it sounds like we do, and then the expansion beyond tier 1 cities and the supportive infrastructure that needs to uphold this. So with that, would love to open it up to the audience for questions. I think we have around 20 minutes or so. So we'd encourage everyone to write their questions into the chat, and then we can direct them to the panelists, to respond to. I think we have one question from Vanshika already in the chat, which is around fast charging. So do you think that, the question is, do you think that fast charging times going down would result in battery swapping becoming obsolete?
No, so that's
Kunal?
not necessarily the case, right? So, fast charging says two things. One is the fact that it reduces your downtime, which is really important if you're a auto rickshaw driver who makes his living off how much time he can be on the road. But the other is also just the upfront cost of ownership, right? I believe the biggest deterrent actually to adoption of electric vehicles in India today is not range anxiety, but the fact that just the upfront cost is so much higher, right? Like for like, take anything. If I have to switch to an electric car, I'll be paying 50% more for the same sort of car specs. By taking the batteries out of the equation, which now the government introduced a policy to be able to do, you have taken half the cost of the vehicle off the table and converted a capex into an opex, right? So we've seen this with police in Hyderabad. Auto rickshaw drivers are super happy to adopt because now suddenly they are paying a significantly lower upfront amount than they were earlier, and everything is now just being paid on a per kilometer basis or per unit basis. So I think it's fast charging is and battery swapping are not necessarily fungible. There are some overlaps, but battery swapping will stay independent of that.
Just to add to that, I mean, we've been investing in this area for sure. I think two things. One is, of course, if you look at the form factor, right, we're going to continue to see battery swapping as an important energy solution for small form factors like 2 and 3 wheelers. Rapid charging, we are seeing faster adoption with larger form factors like commercial vehicles, buses, and commercial 3 wheelers and things like that. Sheetal had brought up a point that there is a potential for local demand charging that will spike during the evening when everybody comes home, and that's why we are looking at both battery swapping and rapid charging to actually move the demand away from the evening charge to during the day charge, because swapping and rapid charging can happen any time of the day. And finally, we've seen different behaviors between commercial use cases and personal use cases. Personal use cases, traditional slow charging is still the preferred means of charging. But commercial use case where you need 24/7 uptime, we are seeing the battery swapping and rapid charging as the preferred method.
Great add-on points. Thanks, Kunal, for raising.
Great. Akshay, any thoughts from your side?
I'm going to say that both of them will coexist. And I draw a lot of similarities from the smartphone industry typically. And EVs are basically a larger form of that. So you had battery swapping actually happening with your phones 20 years back on your Nokia days. But today your phone fast charges in 15 minutes. And I drive a lot of similarities, but both the segment will actually coexist. The lower end, especially on the e-rickshaw side and the slow two-wheelers, will still have battery swapping, specifically because of the fact that Sheetal mentioned that their cost of ownership, especially on a capex side, is something that they can't afford, and they want to offload all of that to OPEX. He's okay paying on OPEX, say 1.5 times more, but battery swapping will still coexist at the bottom of the pyramid. But as you keep moving upwards, the aspiration is to get fast charging. Maybe today, Kunal is saying that the passenger level, we may still have slow charging work very well for us. But essentially the time that I want to dedicate to charging will be significantly lower in the future. So as we tend to progress, say 5 years down the line, fast charging would become a norm, and there will be technologies in the background, softwares in the background that will actually ensure that you are able to balance this off with the grid and ensure that you're able to charge with the amount of load that's available in each one of these premises. So both will coexist in the future. But I don't see swapping happening at very large form factors of vehicles like a truck or a bus at this point of time. At least I am not able to foresee it in the next 3 to 5 years.
Mhm. Got it. So the essential opinion is basically the form factor, both the form factor and the total cost of ownership define which sort of charging mechanism is suitable for which kind of vehicle, essentially, and they both will continue to coexist in the future.
And I also want to add, at least in today's use case, we don't really have that 24 hours uptime requirement currently coming up in the market. Even if you're talking of an auto e-rickshaw guy, a passenger e-rickshaw or a passenger three-wheeler guy, he's a single driver come operator, and he would drive this vehicle for 12 odd hours. He can't really run that vehicle for 2 shifts. And at night also, the uptime or the demand for getting passengers to do around the city is quite low. Also, the deliveries currently that are happening on a commercial side have typically been the e-commerce players, and you don't receive goods today at night, when you're from 12 in the night. So hence, at both these times, there have been downtimes, and hence it has really not pushed the markets to kind of really think, do I have to do fast charging all the time? Because there is that downtime already inbuilt in the system at this point of time. So hence there have been mechanisms to work around battery swapping, work around slow charging in the current market scenario.
Got it. Thanks a lot, Akshay. And thanks to Kunal and Sheetal for your responses. We have a few more questions in the chat, so just to be efficient, I'll try to club them together. One is on the OEM opportunity. So there's a question from Devansh about the more than 300 three-wheeler EV OEMs as we speak. So where is the market going for OEMs? Does it consolidate and do they coexist? That's one. And I think I'll also combine this question with another one on EVs on the subscription space. So basically the question from Maitri on the cost of an EV vehicle reducing over time and financing options increasing, does a subscription option lose its novelty? So we have those two questions. There's a few others on batteries, which I'll club together in the second round. So any thoughts from you all on the panel on the OEM opportunity and the consolidation of OEMs, and also the EV financing and lending opportunity?
So I can take it. So 300 three-wheeler, I think a majority of these is probably the e-rickshaw companies, because if I look at the higher end e-rickshaw three-wheelers, there's probably fewer than that. Now, a majority of these are not really OEMs per se. These are typically assemblers of Chinese CKDs or SKDs that are coming from China. So there's very little value addition, very IPO. These are commoditized products. And in these business models, it's typically a race to the bottom, right? The more efficient and scale you get, the cheaper you get, but they become commoditized. So there's no brands being created. But if I go one level above, when I look at the more traditional three-wheelers, there is some technology that is being built. There are some IPs that are being created, and we will see both consolidation happening in that space. What we have seen on the OEM side is that the challenger brands or these new age EV OEMs have a small window of opportunity to scale their business. When the volumes are low, the larger market leaders like a Bajaj or a Hero or a Maruti on the four-wheeler side, they look at these small numbers and they don't think it's worth their effort or time to actually disrupt their existing supply chain to sort of launch EV. But once the volumes start picking up, then you'll see these OEMs start launching. We've seen Hero launch Vida, we've seen Bajaj launch Chetak and things like that. Traditional OEMs have the ability to catch up with the challenger guys because they have a brand and they have distribution sorted. Whereas companies like Ather and Ola have to solve for the brand awareness and distribution. So that window of opportunities could be a few years, and hence we're going to see a lot of consolidation happening. On the subscription versus financing model, today's subscription is extremely popular for a couple of reasons. One is there's a huge demand for EVs, especially in the shared mobility platforms, right? Whether it's a food delivery platform, etc. They don't own these assets. They're looking for supply, and supply doesn't exist. So there are companies that are buying and leasing these assets to individuals who are then providing food delivery, bike taxi, logistics services as well. The reason why people are hesitating to buy EVs right now, one is interest rates are much higher, and because banks are not sure of the residual value or the default rates on EVs. People are also scared of buying, and the reason for that is because battery life and vehicle life are different. People are not sure that if a vehicle is going to last 15 years, am I going to have to swap my battery twice or thrice during if it's a fixed battery. In battery swapping, it doesn't exist. So until unless we have some clarity in terms of what the residual values of EVs are, and for that, you're going to have to go through at least 3 or 4 ownership cycles for us to get better clarity on that. I think subscription models will remain quite popular.
Thanks a lot, Kunal. Appreciate it. So now we have just room for one additional question. So I'm trying to actually club together the battery questions. So we have a bunch of questions around lithium-ion batteries, whether they are the sort of long-term solution, or will sodium-ion batteries be able to take over? Linked to that, your opinions or perspectives on the entire battery recycling opportunity in India and how we see this space evolving over the next 5 years. So where are batteries kind of placed right now, primarily towards two-wheeler and three-wheelers, whereas four-wheeler batteries are still some time away. And I think, yes. And then in terms of the lithium-ion batteries cost economics, how does that work for the energy storage market opportunity? And what are the potential drivers for this opportunity to be realized? So would love to welcome any panelists to comment on these points around battery storage solutions, battery chemistries, and the recycling opportunity for batteries.
Just one small thing from my side is not going into technical details. This battery regeneration or recycling is a very big industry, and what we have seen in markets like China and US, that it starts with smaller traction, then it grows, and I think in China it's now a multi-billion-dollar industry itself. One good thing is that not only in India but also in Southeast Asia, we are seeing, while we're talking about setting up EVs infrastructure, an equal amount of focus is given on the recycling, where it happens, and not just from the industry players, but also from the policy players to create that end-to-end enabling ecosystem. So just a perspective of from how we see with South Asia versus Southeast Asia. So yes, it's very promising, at least from a very macro view.
And Sheetal, just wanted to perhaps pick on you on this one, since you invested in Race Energy and the deep tech technologies around batteries. What sort of would you say is sort of the solid state for the long term kind of the chemistries around batteries, whether these particular new chemistries will come into the foray, or will we be mainly operating on lithium going forward? And would the cost economics work for this type of chemistry?
Sure. I'll be very honest. I don't have a strong view on this yet because it's a perspective we're still trying to develop. Just battery storage, or more broadly, energy storage is one of those areas where we feel like we don't know enough, and we're trying to develop pieces around it. Our current impression is that there are going to be that alternative technologies will come into play, but I think I'll be very honest, we don't have a handle on whether they are the ones going to become the dominant form factor or not. I don't know if Akshay, who's an entrepreneur and closer to technology, whether he has a better perspective on this.
Sure. So I think the way this is going to really pan out, it's not about sodium, lithium, or even aluminum. I think last year it's all about aluminum, right? It's about the density that you can pack, on the energy density that you can pack on that cell, so that it's the carriage cost of the whole vehicle reduces. And once that happens, you can carry more load or more passengers, and hence ensuring that you have more efficiency driven when you are actually driving these vehicles. So predominantly when you are looking at that kind of an aspect, when especially on the EV side, you are looking at battery density. When you are looking at storage spaces, you are looking at cost. But it doesn't matter how bulky it is, but if it is able to give you on a long term lower cost of storing this energy and using it on the shelf life basis, then those applications will be used on the storage side. So on my perspective, sodium becomes at this point of time, at this particular point of time, sodium is fairly largely available in the market, and hence sodium ions could be used for storage purposes, battery storage purposes, electricity storage purposes at this point of time. And lithium is currently being used on because it has a higher density and a proven model that you have seen grow right from the smartphone industries to now in the EV space, right? So that is what we're seeing. Obviously economies might change with you mining these rare earth metals and processing them. The good thing about once you process this, it's not that lithium starts reducing once everything has been mined and there are batteries in the market. All you really have to do in the recycling process is once it goes through the second life of storage, where it actually is being used for storage of energy, all the lithium can be removed. 100% of that lithium can be removed, refurbished, and then used as a completely new battery having 100% capacity as it used to have on the original days. So that's the good part of doing this mining activity as a one-time activity, as we see progress of adoption happening in the market. But I'm no expert in battery technology myself, so there are other technologies that are coming up in the market.
Great. I think we may not have time for additional questions. Unfortunately, we have to close at 4 p.m. So would invite the panelists just to maybe share as a closing remarks, any final thoughts with the audience about your view on where we're going next in terms of the transition to EV, and how, if there are any sort of founders in the audience, how they can get in touch with you if you're an investor, or perhaps any ecosystem players that you'd like to sort of connect with as well. Any kind of final views that you'd like to share? So perhaps I'll start with you, Kunal.
No, absolutely. Again, thank you so much, IVCA, for inviting us, and Priya, thank you for sort of moderating this session. No, I mean, if anybody wants to reach out to us, we have a website. We just launched a new website, so it's fresh and new. So please do visit us at advantage.vc. My email address is kk@advantage.vc. So if you need to drop me an email, please do that as well. I think being a sector-focused fund, we've spent 5 years of researching in this opportunity, and sort of our sort of secret sauce is that we have built a platform where we have now successful companies in the domain. We're backed by leading brands, mobility or auto brands, including the Hero Group as well as Motherson, and they add a lot of value to our portfolio companies as well. Ultimately, what we are seeing is that there is, we talk about $1 trillion opportunity. It's not so much $1 trillion, but what we see is that this is really the time to build, companies that will live beyond our lifetime and make a serious dent in the universe, as they say. So if anybody is looking to start up and they have some deep insights into this space, we'd be more than happy to talk to you and partner with you and help build out something.
Great. Thanks, Kunal. Sheetal, any final thoughts from your side on this topic?
Just that, I'm very excited about this opportunity, and Kunal and I can't wait for everybody in Delhi to go electric so we can breathe better air.
Great to hear. Akshay, Kishalya, any thoughts, final concluding remarks?
I just wanted to add on one thing, that though it's a $1 trillion opportunity, and it's also an opportunity for us to do a lot of exports from India. I know the software piece is something which is very evident, but just to give you a perspective, India builds 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers for the world, and most of our exports actually from the incumbent side is sent outside. And we've been seeing that happening with large players who have now committed to electrification. Say, to give you an example, maybe TVS, right? Like how Kunal actually mentioned that TVS could do catch up very fast in the market, even though they launched very late. And they can do the same thing across globally because they have the distribution network already available with them, and so can a Hero or etc. So that's another opportunity which I really urge a lot of entrepreneurs to really think on, because there can be technology that can be built here in India. We can skip stones from the Western markets and actually look at not just building here but outside as well.
Thank you, Akshay. Kishalya, any final concluding thoughts?
I think there are two thoughts on a concluding note. It's also important to quantify these impacts, because greenwashing is very real, and I think people, and it's not just GHG emission, it's about the real genuine impact in terms of technology development, direct, indirect job, the value chain creation. I think we should also talk about, when we talk about EV, the larger impact which it brings in the ecosystem, the incremental GDP output which it contributes not just from taking subsidies, but negating the same by an economic output coming through. So that is one thing which we think is important. And second is from a ecosystem perspective, again, doing a comparative across markets. I think while we are talking about competition, and it's good to know, for ecosystem to foster, we have seen in markets a collaborative approach within the startups, which grows the ecosystem together, is also as important as being competitive. So that collaborative spirit in EV is also much needed to grow the ecosystem in the larger sort of remit of the pie. We have to grow the pie rather than fight for the pie.
Great. Thank you so much, Kishali, and thank you to all the panelists for such an enriching and inspiring discussion around the investment opportunity for the EV space in India and across multiple different themes. So I think it's been really great food for thought for the founders, investors, and other players who've attended this session. And thank you to IVCA for organizing and inviting us to be part of it. So over to you, Akriti.
And Priya, thank you for moderating. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
to all
you.
panelists, Priya, Akshay, Kunal, Kishlia, Sheetal. I think it was a great session. We've been receiving some amazing comments from the attendees. I think we had more than 80 private equity venture capital professionals who were a part of this session. And I've been receiving some nice emails, so I'll be sharing the feedback with you all. Our next session is on managing data and climate analytics. So if anyone, whoever's listening in, wants to share any feedback, any speaker suggestions, we want to make these sessions super engaging for our members. And we want to do these sessions on a monthly basis. So any feedback will be very much appreciated. Thank you to the panelists and the attendees. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.